Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, February the 5th. A lot to talk about this morning. We still have a powerful storm impacting California, and it will impact much of the western U.S. over the next couple of days. Tremendous rainfall in low-lying areas, tremendous snowfall in those higher elevation areas such as the Sierra Nevada, where the back-to-back storms here will end up producing as much as 8, 9, 10 feet of snow in some areas, those higher elevation locations of the Sierra Nevadas in eastern California. Many of the Rocky Mountain states, all those higher elevation locations, should get plenty of snow as well over the next day or two. Skiers should be quite happy. We still have on tap a pretty big change in the overall weather pattern coming next week to the central and eastern states. All signs continue to point to a change to a colder weather pattern. It should remain stormy. In other words, the return of winter for many parts of the central and eastern U.S. Beginning next week. And I think that change will last all the way into March, maybe even as late as mid-March. We have quite a few things to go through here over the next several minutes. We'll start off with the California storm system. This is a look at the 250 millibar jet stream going across the Pacific Ocean as we begin the day here on Monday morning. This forecast set of maps here from last night's Zero-Z GFS. First of all, here is a powerful jet stream slamming into California this morning, and this is the source of the moisture coming from the Pacific Ocean all the way into California. And again, some tremendous rainfall amounts in those low-lying areas, certainly several inches in places like Los Angeles, and several feet of snow just inland across the higher elevation locations. Now, this is the second storm in a series of these El Nino-induced storm systems, or I should say El Nino-enhanced storm systems. The combination of the two, again, ending up with a ton of rainfall in the coastal sections of California. There does seem to be a break in the pattern coming, though, and we can kind of tell that with this forecast coming up here. I'll show you in a minute here of the jet stream at 250 millibars. Before I get to that, I just want to point out that this is the equator right down here. This is where El Nino continues to rage here, right in this part of North America. We've certainly talked about this El Nino enhancing the southern branch of the jet stream, and that's what we're talking about right here, just to the north of El Nino, where sea surface temperatures are warmer than normal. You get this enhancement or this activation of that southern branch of the jet stream. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Nothing too unusual here going on in California and really across the southern states as well, not only now but going forward. And we'll see in a moment here that Southern Oscillation Index continues to drop on the negative side, and that indicates intensifying El Nino here, and that's been happening for the last week or two. Now, let's quickly move forward here and watch what happens here. We get this kind of last gasp of a 250 millibar jet streak sliding into Mexico by later this week, and then high pressure tends to fill in across the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, and it doesn't look like there'll be a repeat performance, at least over the next week or so, maybe even beyond that. But again, not really the same thing happening. We're all the way out now to a week from right now, Monday, February 12th here. So once this current system passes by California over the next day or two, it looks like there certainly may have a break for at least another week or so. Well, let's continue to focus on that California storm right now. This is the forecast map from the Zero-Z GFS for the western states, and here's the surface low pressure system as we begin the day here on Monday morning. 988 millibar lows, tremendous winds. Also, I saw a gust of at least 62 miles per hour in San Francisco. Again, a very powerful storm system with heavy snow over the Sierra Nevada right here. Lake Tahoe is being buried in snow, and a continuation of the rain across the coastal low-lying areas, and it slides to the east here over the next couple of days. Here's the Tuesday morning, and all those higher elevation locations in the Rocky Mountain states, from Nevada to Utah, even to Colorado and parts of Mexico and Arizona, will get a lot of snowfall. Very good news for skiers out in the western U.S. And here we go by the middle of the weekend. This first system that slammed into California late last week moved all the way across the southern states and produced severe weather across Florida. This second El Nino enhanced storm system will not take that southern route. Instead, we'll see it'll end up moving to the north and east. Let's continue to push forward here. Again, a lot of the Rocky Mountain states, and by the time we get to Thursday, 3 days from now, that surface storm really slides from California, maybe down the coast, and then takes that northeast track into the Dakotas and Minnesota. It does not take that same southern route that the prior storm did. And this will result in a lot of snowfall across the Dakotas and Montana by the middle of this week. Well, in terms of total precipitation amounts, let's move forward from this morning. This is Monday morning from the last night's run of the GFS, and we'll just walk through this and watch the kind of the precipitation pattern. Again, impacts California and then the Rocky Mountain states, even some significant total precipitation amounts across central Arizona, where really they can use the moisture. And it, again, instead of sliding into Texas like that prior storm did, it ends up pushing to the north and east. And here we go, by the time we get to Friday morning, most of the precipitation kind of tell the pattern here, moving from southwest to northeast towards the Dakotas and Minnesota by later in the. Now let's finally wrap up with this California storm system in terms of the total snowfall amounts. And again, unbelievable amounts of snow here over the Sierra Nevada. You remember last winter, California got inundated with storm after storm, tremendous rainfall amounts, no sign of a drought anymore. And those inland higher elevation locations, Sierra Nevada, had some really record snowfall last winter season, and these back-to-back storms producing as much as 7, 8, 9, 10 feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada. And here we'll move forward here, and again, some of these higher elevation locations across the Rocky Mountain states will get significant snow as well, all the way into Colorado and New Mexico and Arizona, and Utah and Nevada, all the way up to Idaho as well. And eventually, this storm system impacts the Montana and the Dakotas, especially North Dakota, by the time we get to the latter part of the week. This is all the way into Saturday morning. So again, this system produces snowfall throughout the Rocky Mountain states and then up into the northern plains, but not down across the central and southern plains, as it's taking that northeast track to the northern plains. Well, let's now focus the second half of this video discussion with what I believe will be a significant change to the overall weather pattern beginning next week for the central and eastern states. It continues to look to me like we'll experience colder than normal conditions starting next week, and that change to a colder than normal pattern in the central and eastern states could very well last well into the month of March. There's lots of teleconnection indices that continue to indicate this pattern change. Another stratospheric warming event. We really have had two bursts of stratospheric warming, one in December and one in January, and another one looks like it will take place over the next couple of weeks, and the one in January I think will contribute to this change to the overall weather pattern, to a colder weather pattern beginning next week. Again, there's roughly a 4 to 6 week delay in the impact of a stratospheric warming event over the polar region and its ultimate impact on the U.S. temperature patterns. At least that's been my experience over the decades of forecasting that I have done. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation. We often refer to this teleconnection index. It tracks kind of a tropical disturbance that on a regular basis moves across the tropical region, and depending on the location of that area of convection or thunderstorms in the tropics can have an impact maybe even I would say a predictable impact on temperatures and precipitation in another part of the world. These are phases. Right here is phase 7, phase 8, phase 1, phase 2. That basically represents different locations along the tropical region where that tropical disturbance exists. And this particular forecast map, the way to read this kind of a plot is that it rotates in a counterclockwise basis going through these phases. This time of the year, these phases, 4, 5, and 6, are warm phases for the central and eastern U.S. Now, this particular forecast map runs from the 5th to the 19th, and you can tell in general, red is the forecast. It tries to move into phase 8 and maybe takes a loop around, but this is February 19th, the last forecast day on this particular sequence of forecast maps, into phase 8. Here we go, phase 8 right here. That is a colder than normal phase for the central and eastern U.S. this time of the year. So this is an indicator that we indeed will have a change in the overall temperature pattern across the central and eastern states from warmer than normal, and we'll have very warm conditions relative to normal later this week in the eastern states, to a colder than normal pattern again beginning next week. Well, another teleconnection index we've been tracking, the Arctic oscillation. This slides into negative territory here, and it's forecast all the way out towards the latter part of February, well into negative territory. That's generally associated with a high latitude blocking, maybe over Greenland, and indeed that appears to be what will develop over the next week or two. Again, that in turn tends to favor colder air masses being able to make their way from northern Canada into the central and eastern U.S. Now here's a look at the Southern Oscillation Index on a daily basis as captured by the Australian Met Center, and you can see here it's becoming more and more negative over the past week or so, and that generally is correlated with an intensification of El Nino in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. This is calculated by taking pressure differences over two areas in the South Pacific, Tahiti and Darwin. More the negative, the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, the more intense the El Nino. So indeed, it's going through a spurt of intensification right now that will continue to produce or result in an active southern branch of the jet stream going forward over the next few weeks. Now, there is a storm threat, by the way, early next week, and we'll certainly have to closely monitor that possibility over the next several days. But I kind of wanted to wrap up here with ensemble runs of the GFS and the Canadian model, both in terms of the 5-day averages for 500 millibar height anomalies, and then the temperature pattern, 850 millibar temperature patterns average over rolling 5-day periods, just to see that there is some agreement between these two separate models, the GFS and the Canadian model, and both of which indicate a big change from warmer than normal conditions this week to colder than normal conditions next week, central and eastern U.S. This is the first 5-day period, this current 5-day period that goes all the way out to February 10th. This is from the ensemble run of the GFS, and we'll just push through here over the rolling 5-day periods going forward here, and watch kind of a significant change here in the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern. By the time we get to days 8 to 12, we start to see this upper level trough kind of intensify and really connect to one over the Pacific Ocean, one over the Atlantic Ocean, and another significant change here is up across Greenland. We have this what looks like a pretty classic Greenland block here, and again we pointed out that Arctic oscillation tends to suggest when it goes into negative territory that we'll get some high latitude blocking. That is indeed what happens here. We're all the way out to days 12 to 16, the 16th of February to the 21st of February. Another important change in the overall weather pattern here is notice the wind flow up in this region here moves like this. A strong ridge forms along the west coast of Canada into Alaska. That's associated with that PNA teleconnection index that we've often shown here in positive territory. This prevents that Pacific mild air from pouring across the country, and instead it's shunted all the way up towards Alaska, and so that kind of cuts off the possibility of warming across much of the U.S. with Pacific Ocean air instead. With this ridge, and this is an important player here across the west coast of Canada, again, that mild air off the Pacific is forced way up to the north. Now let's compare that to the Canadian model run. This is from 0Z last night, the ensemble version, days 1 to 5. We'll just push forward here, and similar to the GFS ensemble run, it ends up with high latitude blocking. Here we go, seeing orange here, that's higher heights than normal over places like Greenland, days 10 to 14, and finally 11 to 15 and 12 to 16. So kind of a similar pattern with high latitude blocking up here, and a deep trough situated over the Atlantic into the eastern U.S., and another one this way, and they may tend to kind of join up here over the southern states. Again, that upper level ridge right here forcing potential mild air from the Pacific Ocean way up to the north towards Alaska instead of flooding the U.S. Well, let's wrap up here by looking at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies from the ensemble runs. First the GFS again, then the Canadian model. This is the current 5-day period, and look at this. A very large area of above normal temperatures, at least at the 850 millibar level. By the way, above normal over Canada this time of year is still some very cold air, but relative to normal, it's on the positive side here. This is a large area, and watch what happens as we go into next week and beyond. Quite a dramatic change. Here we go all the way out to days 12 to 16. What was a widespread area of above normal temperatures flips across the central U.S., across the eastern U.S. by the time we get to next week and beyond, and it looks like with high latitude blocking kind of setting up, this should have some staying power. Finally, let's shift to the Canadian model run. This is the ensemble Canadian model run. Same sort of prediction here as the GFS. Very warmer than normal, much warmer than normal conditions across the Hudson Bay region of Canada into the northern U.S., throughout the central U.S. in this current 5-day period, but we'll just move forward all the way out into next week and beyond. And again, similar to the GFS, quite a dramatic change in the overall weather pattern. Where that high latitude blocking sets up here, you end up with those warmer than normal conditions at the 850 millibar level, but down, undercutting it, colder than normal conditions really stretching from coast to coast according to this particular model run of the ensemble. And this is in that period, February 16th to the 21st. So the California storm continues to have big impact over the next few days, and it moves from California all the way to the northern plains. A lot of snowfall, not only in the mountains of California, but the Rocky Mountain states, and then ultimately Montana and the Dakotas, especially North Dakota, get a good amount of snow out of this system. Meanwhile, next week, big pattern change comes to the central and eastern states. All the indicators continue to point to that pattern change of colder than normal beginning next week and going beyond that. It looks like it'll have some staying power, likely well into the month of March. So that's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.